So it's a real honor and privilege to have Dr. Kaliko Baker with us, Alakai, on so many things in Moʻolelo, as a Mo'olono on Ko'olave, and his amazing keiki, Kaipu. And so we wanted to just talk story with you around these ideas of kapu. And, in today's context, that means a lot of things for different people. Now, this series is just really trying to understand and to bring light to our people, in the best ways to exercise kapu and its value for our lives today. Not an easy conversation, but you folks live it in many ways, and it's a chance to illuminate for our lahui. So mahalo nui for being here. It's a real honor and privilege for me. I'm humbled and excited to talk story. Maybe can you describe what is kapu and what is your relationship to kapu?
So kapu is political. It was a means by which ali'i would enforce the rules of the land. They were basically the kanawai that people would follow. To see that and then to think about what is kapu and maybe take a long leap into today, we don't make our own laws for ourselves anymore. It's no wonder why we have to look at kapu and say, well, what is it? Kapu was the way of life. Everything was set in kapu versus noa spaces. For us to look at kapu, what is kapu today? And what does it mean today? It means that we look at where we should put our parameters around certain spaces and say that, hey, we have to act in certain ways during certain times. That's a form of kapu.
Kaipu, you wanna?
Yeah, kaipu. Yeah, kapu.
Yeah, we can think about kapu as the substantial content which gives form and meaning to life as it exists. Kapu is what restricts us into a respectable shape, is what gives us proper form, is what enables us to achieve higher levels of development. Kapu is the mechanism by which we stay accountable to our practices, to our communities, and especially to our ho'omana, which flows through the entirety of the Hawaiian world. Everything is kind of mediated through ho'omana. And the ways in which we ho'omana are dictated to us by the kapu. Kapu, in simpler terms, is really just a purpose. When you have kapu, you have purpose. You have things that you won't do and things that you must do in that imposition of kapu. When we think about the ways in which kind of kapu aloha functions, I guess on the mauna, and in different circles, you will absolutely not find people getting radical or chaotic or kind of wielding any sort of really kind of bad energy towards anybody else. Kanaka are to be strictly in a state of aloha. And we can talk about, how productive that is. I think, there's room for other kapu to be instated, but, that is the kapu of aloha. It's we will not do certain things so that we can call this nonviolent direct action, this whatever, serving whatever purpose that people have been gathered for. That's kind of generally the two ways that I understand kapu.
Well, mahalo for that. So when I think about what we're talking about, historical perspectives and bridging it today with meaning and these awesome examples of kapu aloha, what do you folks think? Do you think is kapu important for our lives today? And I know you can share personally and your thoughts. Is it important for the lahui?
Ooh, is kapu important? Resounding yes. Why though? Why is kapu important? Now I think back to my entire adult life has been I've been involved with Kaho'olawe. When Dr. Emmett Aluli's sued for access rights to Kaho'olawe and won, it really sent the Protect Kaho'olawe Ohana into this quick deep dive into what kapu they were going to bring to their accesses, because basically the PKO, the Protect Kaho'olawe Ohana, were victorious in the lawsuit because of the Religious Freedom Act. And we can't talk about Hawaiian religion without talking about kapu. So what were the kapu that the Protect Kaho'olawe Ohana were to pursue? So George Helm prior to his disappearance and passing, was real keen on Lono Ika Makahiki. So what George Helm wanted was to reinstate the Makahiki on Kaho'olawe. And also the Edith Kanaka Ole, when in conversation with George Helm, drove home the point that what Kanaka need at the time of the initial occupations of Kaho'olawe was Lono. Because Lono brings the kapu of the people back to the society. That is, Lono's rules and guidelines dictates how we should move through our everyday practices. And the Edith Kanakaole and what would become the Edith Kanakaole Foundation designed makahiki ceremonies specific for Kaho'olawe. She tasked her daughter, Auntie Nalani Kanakaole, to design the makahiki on Kaho'olawe, to reinstate makahiki on Kaho'olawe. 9 Mo'olono were trained, and 9 is a significant number. Like our kapu number is 9, because that's how many people landed in Kuheia. And we have 9 Ho'okupu. So for us, our kapu is really Kaho'olawe specific. Now this might open a whole nother can of things. Aren't kapu like the Pai Aina go through the same kapu and have the same exact sort of rituals? And no, we should never think that what people are doing on Kaho'olawe is exactly what people should be doing at Pu'uhuluhulu when the occupation was going on. That's not what we should be thinking. Should there be traces between the kapu where you can sort of sync up and line up and say, oh yeah, I can grab onto that because I understand that. Yeah, of course, my guy. So kapu was necessary to solidify the movement to stop the bombing of Kaho'olawe. Absolutely necessary. And it absolutely galvanizes the Protect Kaho'olawe Ohana as its core ho'omana. And I would like to jump this out to the Pu'uhuluhulu situation back in 2019 and such. It was like 2015 where it started with the ceremony and and all this chanting here, chanting there, but then Antipua guys, Kikuhi guys, they just took it up. They just said, no, we're gonna educate our lahui by setting kapu 3 times a day. We're going to ceremony. We're going to ka'i ka'aha. We're going to be kapu, and we're going to do the same pules all day, and then we're going to have space for kapu situations to happen on the pai homo, for people to walk up and be officially received by the kupuna sitting there. That's all kapu, because what that is, that sets up the parameters of what governance looked like on the Mauna. I love that. I absolutely love that. When it all started happening, I immediately I texted Daviana McGregor and Dr. Aluli and a few others within Ohana. I was like, the PKO got to go to Pu'uhuluhulu and officially show our aloha on the pai. That is a cultural obligation we have, particularly with our history with the Ohana Kanaka Ole and with the synergy between the movements and stuff. But anyway, so we did.
Kaipu. So in your life and your practice, do you think kapu is important for us and the
Yeah,
lahui? Yeah.
I'm unsurprisingly kind of in agreement, as that's kind of the pahuhopo of this panel. But yeah, I absolutely kind of want to echo some of the things my dad said, about how kapu is what holds people accountable in those situations, especially if you're going for a purpose, you're going with a kapu to keep that purpose. In stating that kapu, that purpose, is really kind of the task of the leadership, I think, as we saw on the Mauna. The beautiful thing about that, I think, is every time when you have the aha on the Mauna, you have people kind of renewing their commitment 3 times a day to the struggle at hand, to the occupation. And in renewing their commitment, they're simultaneously kind of renouncing certain tasks. At the end of every ceremony, they go over the kanavai, they go over the kapu again. They talk about all the rules. And at Dipuake, she's always no WEAPONS. She spell them out and all that kind of stuff. She talks the way she kind of gets into that routine, and Kekuhi picks it up as well, and whoever's leading the ceremony recites all of those rules to keep people accountable and to reinstate the kapu, to make sure that people are there for the right reasons. This is kind of starkly, I think, contrasted to who we are and who we are allowed to be in every other capacity in life. Now, when we talk about kapu, I think it's important that we also bring in a conversation of what is not kapu, and that's noa. For me, the central problem of this day and age for Kanaka is that that state of being noa is exasperated by logics of capitalism and kind of this neoliberal age in which people are encouraged, and it's articulated as a kind of need to find yourself, to be who you are meant to be kind of, to discover this whatever latent potential within yourself. And I think that's starkly in contrast with the ways in which our kupuna navigated the world. Because the Kanaka Noa has no kind of positive content. It's just kind of this pliable shell, ready and willing to consume, indulge, and be morphed into whatever particular life they want to make for themselves. Olelo no Eao 76, Mrs. Pukui, she leaves to us, this pejorative remark in Aiku Aihele. In her translation, she says, it's eat standing, eat walking. And it's said of anything done without ceremony or of anything unrestrained by kapu. So this lack of restriction, the ability to simply Aiku Aihele without reverence for food, which is very well kind of documented in the Aikapu as being this very sacred process of consuming life-sustaining content. Without reverence for life, this is articulated by our kupuna as not being an appropriate life, not a life worth living. This life that is unexamined, that is unrestrained. We need restriction. We need laws. We need kapu in order to fully manifest as Kanaka. The kapu being this positive substance that comes from Ho'omana, that comes from Yorakua, but some sort of positive substance comes from that akua in the kapu, because that's what keeps you kind of accountable to day-to-day life. Kapu is intrinsic to proper Kanaka subjectivity, Kanaka modes of existence, because they provide laws and a kind of like a prescriptive model for how to exist properly. Kind of thinking about the idea that we're born Noah. We're born with this kind of limitless potentiality. And it is only in the imposition of the kapu, whether that comes through a sort of a kaimua ceremony or an initiation into a certain practice, or a commitment into saying, I will noho ikealo of a certain kupuna or a certain master. I will submit myself to a certain cause, to a certain way of living, a practice that will dictate for me the rest of my existence. It's in that submission, that forfeiture of freedom and identity, that we find a proper way of living, that we achieve a state of pono. Yeah, I just want to juxtapose it to the hedonistic logic of being for self, this abstract freedom that is kind of dictated that we must explore, that we must find ourselves, be what we're meant to be. Like, I think that is just super problematic, because when we take up this identity, when we try to create this identity for ourselves, I'm going to be a lawyer, or I'm going to be a fashion designer, I'm going to be an aloha aina, I'm going to be a kiai, or I'm going to be, all of these things that we create, these images of ourselves, those are at the end of the day only labels. The identity is always, to a certain extent, an illusory self, a fallacy, and an impossible symbolic representation. We're creating this big kind of image that we are going to try and identify with, but you cannot fully get to that place. What you can do is malama your kapu, ho'oko your kuleana, loi yourself with your loina. Like those kind of things. You can do the tangible. You cannot do this massive kind of abstract symbolic representation of an identity that you're projecting out into the world via your Instagram bio, or your all these kind of things that we're constantly branding ourselves. It's unachievable, it's impossible. What's possible is the real, tangible, everyday maintenance of kapu, maintenance of practice, submission to cause, to the actual practice of aloha aina, rather than just calling yourself, I am an aloha aina. Like that kind of day to day existence.
Again, super rich, and it's really bringing back a earlier kind of conversation that we had. You're So there is no kapu without Noah, right? And thinking of when you put it into some of those ways that you did, Kaipo, around capitalism and sort of this, you know, neoliberal, go out, discover yourself, but buy as much as you possibly can that you need to make you feel better to
Mm-hmm.
consume, right? And trying to find meaning sort of in that, really from a position of void, right? But then we have this kapu and Noah, and as you're putting it, it's like it has to be a part of the practice. It has to be rooted in our kupuna, our traditions, rooted in place is what I heard earlier, in terms of variations. And it sounds like, there's a rigor to it, right? There's like kanaka without kapu, almost like pigeon, make any kind. You can just go
Yeah,
make any kind, and there's a time to make any kind, in the garage or whatever with a few close friends. But I think what you're saying
absolutely.
is, but there's also, our lives are about movement towards something and dedicating. And you folks have spent decades in becoming mo'olono, training others in, reviving the arts, looking at Nupepa. I mean, all of these tremendous gifts, that you've provided spaces for people to, I guess, in some ways find kapu or their relationship to different aspects of kapu. What could you say to somebody that hasn't had these opportunities yet? How could someone cultivate their understanding and appreciation for the practice of kapu, you think?
If you're thinking, man, I need some kapu in my life, be ready. Find a space that has kapu. Like for us guys on Kaho'olawe, we go 5 and 6 day huakai on Kaho'olawe. We have probably a few hours of hardcore, like very stringent kapu periods. Then we have many hours of semi kapu periods, and then we have some hours of Noah. So we can experience levels of kapu in ceremonial spaces. Now, can you are there other spaces around Hawaii that replicate that? Maybe, but find that couple or recognize when that couple finds you.
I think the thing that I would kind of maybe a little bit diverge from what my dad is saying is, I wouldn't say look for the kapu. I would say look for the master. Look for the master of whatever practice finds you, hopefully, whether that be a kumuhula or a master practitioner of, some sort of kalai or ulana or, lua, all those different kinds of practices. Be willing to make that decision, whether or not you're going to submit to it. And can you, in that submission, commit to submitting? Because there's nothing more irritating than people who make like they go and commit and who flake out. Because then that casts a shadow on all of the mana that was, as said, to be ho'omanad to that point. And we have this kind of belief, once you engage in ho'omana, engage in that kapu, you have to continue to feed that particular practice. And another thing that I will say about how to bring about kapu or whatever in your life, there's that other olelo no'eau, ola ola kahuevai piha ole, which speaks of the gargling and obnoxious sound of an empty water gourd.
Mm-hmm.
The lack of water makes for a loud gourd. And that lack of water, I think, can be equated to a lack of substance, a lack of kapu. And, the huevai is a common metaphor for the kanaka. That's why Kumukiave writes in the Aloha Hua Inuia Kea, he talks about lahui huevai ola. It's a lahui of living gourds, full of water, abundant, kind of cup runneth over kind of metaphor. But Pukui talks about that those who spoke a lot could not be trusted. Those who spoke a lot were not to be taught, because running your mouth and speaking of the kapu intrinsic to the practice, the kapu that come with practice, erodes the kapu, takes away from the mana. So understanding that kapu is also a little bit like Fight Club, don't talk about it. That's why we keep this kind of conversation very abstract, because we're not going to talk about the specifics, because the kapu is kapu. So when you go about finding a master, listen. Nana ka maka ho'olohe ka pepeao pa'a ka waha, a hana kalima.
So would you then say that imihaku, or the looking for a master, would be somewhat synonymous with looking for water to fill the huevai?
Absolutely. I mean,
Or
you think
looking for
about,
a source to fill that huevai,
yeah,
so that you
yeah,
don't ola. You're more like halana. Or
yeah,
ale ale ka vai o ka huevai a halana I waho. You cannot
yeah.
help but to share your knowledge, because there's just so much knowledge oozing out of your gourd. Just no can help. And then you get up on the social medias and make any kind talking, oh, I got this, I got that, Venmo. Kela.
Yeah. And I mean, in the context of Imihaku, you got to realize that Umi wouldn't be in position really to become the master that he is, the big kind of ali'i figure that we recognize him to be today, if it weren't for the
The
people who recognized him as such first and
Mhm.
served him. So you have great power as someone who forfeits their identity to promote this master, you know? And I just love seeing the videos of the limuhui now, as they kind of form around people like Uncle Wally and Uncle Mac, kind of, and you have this kind of younger generation, not necessarily young, but adult, and their haumana that they are taking care of, propping up these masters. To now we can recognize kind of universally across the pai aina the value of these kupuna, and through them the value of limu, and how that's an indicator of so many different things in kind of the way we manage our resources. But it took the inauguration of this limu hui via the submission of certain folks to these master kupuna
Mhm.
in order for them to have this kind of master status, because they're not going to ola ola. And unfortunately, the only way to gain recognition nowadays seems to be a sort of an ola ola. But that's antithetical, again, to the ways in which Kanaka deem proper behavior. So we got to recognize that when we find a master, we have an opportunity to really promote that knowledge via humble service. Not necessarily kaina and ola ola kind things, just by diligent hard work and submission to the practice, to the ike of our kupuna, we can do great things. We can make a lot of positive restorative ripple effects in our lahui.
Yeah, we're in the company of some of very great leadership. If you think about He'eia and what's happening in He'eia, and the humble beginnings that He'eia was seeing 25 years ago, maybe, 20 years ago. And then you get people like Hi'ile Ma going down Lokoi'a and and just saying, hey, no, this place can be better. And now you drive by, what do we see now? What do we see like on full Kuapa? I grew up
Mm-hmm.
my whole life there. Rode my bike past that place how many times on the stinky bridge in He'eia? Was stink because it was rotten.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody was taking care. Then you get people like Hile guys come, and then they get the kind Pai Pai or He'eia established, and there's many agents in that. There are many agents. They took on the couple that needed for that Aina to be Momona again.
Yeah, I just deeply appreciate your folks, sharing your experience and Ike and prescribing in a way ways for people to heal, to connect, to feel their hu'ewai. I mean, the best metaphor, is to share wara. I'm wondering, if you would share a little bit of your own personal how you got here. Kaliko, did you see yourself? I think there's going to be two different answers, I imagine, because I remember seeing you pushing Kaipo in when baby thing around the university when I was a 20 something, looking up, going, wow, this guy's amazing. So he gonna probably answer him real different. But you thought
Yeah,
this was where you was gonna be?
you know, no. The answer must be no, because I started this whole conversation off saying I'm a keiki kula moku aina, right? On public school at very humble beginnings. Grew up, divorced parents, poor. I was really happy to not go to jail, like a lot of my friends. There's no miss when we have conversations with friends and they talk about how they spent time in jail. Oldness. But yeah, it's real. So when I got the opportunity to go to college, I took it. We took it. Everybody wanted me to be a lawyer. Oh, Kaliko's going to be the family lawyer. He's going to take care of all of our legal stuff and whatever. Blah, 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 blah. And I was like, okay, whatever. I'll just do whatever the family wants. Then I took my first Hawaiian language class and I was like, ooh, I like this. But then, saw some friends going Kaho'olawe, and they talked about how Kaho'olawe changed them. I said, okay, I got to do that. So I was like a senior, and we did on Huaka'i Kamakaiki. I did my first Huaka'i was to Makaiki. Had all kind of hammers on this trip. It was like a mean trip, and I was just like, I was a little overwhelmed. And one of the wahines of one of the guys in the pa, she looked at me and she said, oh, Kaliko, you coming back for closing? And I was like, I don't know. She said, something real simple. Oh, you open something, you got to close them. And I was like, yeah. So, you start something, you got to see it through. Essentially, is what I took away from that at the ripe age of 21. So I've been going makahiki ever since. If it wasn't for the kapu of ceremony, I would not be Associate Professor Kaliko today. I'll tell you that. I'll tell you that for sure.
I think by the time I was in high school, I knew that I couldn't live without the practice of being a mo'olono on Ko'olawe. It is now imperative to my life that I continue to go to Ko'olawe. It is the yardstick by which I measure my life, continuing to ho'omana, this practice. Is doing everything in my power to make sure that when I go back next year, or when we go back in November, in a couple weeks, that I am better than I was in February for closing. To relate more holistically to the practice and to the ways in which we relate to Aina in a more general sense, in the ways we live today. That is knowing the names of the winds and the rains, knowing the inoa of the Vahipana, knowing the Mo'olelo. It's imperative that you know the places that you are quote unquote kama'aina with. You're not really kama'aina unless you are kama, which is like fastened, tied, restrained to the aina. This kupuna waimau, he writes in Kaho'omana Kahiko in Kanupepa Kuokoa in 1865, a ole he ho'okahuna ana. Ina he makua kane ike ko ui ka pule kuni, ka pule ana paha, pule lawai'a, pule kalai va'a, a me ia pule aku a ia pule aku. A leila nana mai oia ia'u, he keiki noho malie. A leila A o mai la kana mea I ike ai. A make ua makua kane nei, waloa a kula nae I kana keiki. So there is no such thing as kahuna training or as training in a certain practice. He talks about in relation to ho'omana, like general Hawaiian religion. If I had a father knowledgeable of pule kuni, pule ana ana, pule lawai'a, pule kalaiva'a, and such a pule, then if he were to look upon me and I be a calm child, then he would teach me what he knows. And I think that's kind of intrinsic to the ways in which we should understand what it means to inherit kapu. It's not something that is your right. It's something that you must earn by being a keiki noho malie. And this process begins with a sort of negation, taking the child away from the world of Noah things, inserting them into the world of kapu. Going back to the metaphor of the huevai, the gourd must first be torn from its roots. It's cut open, emptied of its seeds, then washed thoroughly and repeatedly until all that galagalas, all the ano inside are taken out. And it takes a lot to wash that out, to empty it completely, to get it to that state of being ready to receive. It's got to be emptied of its natural content for the huevai to be called a proper huevai. That is a hue carrying vai, a person living with kapu. Are you willing to be cut from your roots to negate your kind of regular, everyday Noah social existence? Are you willing to do that in order to become a huevai, to be part of the La Hui Huevaiola? These are the really kind of difficult questions that we need to grapple with. That's something that I have to constantly remind myself. It's hard to grapple with the fact that you cannot do whatever you like, especially when you see everybody else doing whatever they like. You need to be able to give up certain things in order to be disciplined in the couple relevant to your particular practice. That's something that I would encourage everybody to consider. What is the mohai necessary for you to give your best whole kupu? It's kind of one way to think about it. So, yeah, mahalo nui.
Whew. This is super awesome, special for me, and thank you guys. No, for real.
Mahalo nui
And
for
yeah,
bringing this conversation.